Hello, my name is Dave Horvat with Perceptum Solutions, the creators of IEPPal. I'll be walking you through our newly released version 2.0. There are a couple things we should cover before we get started. First is that IEPPal is a two-pronged solution that uses your everyday computer, Mac or PC, for the tasks that involve most of the typing. We at IEPPal love the iPad, but also have to acknowledge that for all of its great attributes, typing on it is not one of them. So you have to set up your account and all of your basic data on your computer, and then once you've logged in, you can sync your data down to the iPad. Now it is important that you remember this because just downloading the iPad app and trying to run it won't get you any results because all of your content isn't there yet. So the first time you log in, you will have to hit the sync button. To that end, let's cover one more important item before we get started. We carefully designed IEPPal to run locally on your iPad and not require an internet connection while you score your sessions. That being said, the first time you ever log in, you will need to be online so that IEPPal can recognize you, and then periodically at the end of a day, at the end of a week, or whenever you desire, you'll need to be online to sync your scores back up to the main reporting system. Other than that though, you can be disconnected and free to roam. We set it up this way so that one, you wouldn't have to have a 3G version of the iPad with an expensive monthly internet charge to go with it, and two, so that you can be free to roam outside of the basic Wi-Fi coverage that your school may provide to places such as the playground or field trips to collect your data. Also, before we get started, while you're watching this video, watch for the little circle flashes that will represent where I place my finger to navigate. They won't be hard to see, but we needed you to know what to look for while you're watching the video. Okay, now that those basics are out of the way, let's get started. I'll be logging in as a new user. So as I mentioned before, I'll have to sync to get my students into the iPad app. Once I supply the correct username and password, I'll be shown the main IEPPal iPad menu. The sync button is right here at the bottom of the list, and I'll just touch it to sync my data. This process normally takes about 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, all done. Now we're ready to go. So let's start a session by touching the top button right here, Start a Session. Now since I've set up multiple caseloads in my user profile in the form of having more than one school, I'll need to select which caseload the students I'm about to work with belong to. I do this by touching the Pick a School button in the upper left. Then I pick my school. Once I've made my selection, the roster of students for that caseload is displayed. This list is scrollable by simply swiping up or down, just as you do with most apps on the iPad. Now you'll notice that I have a lot of actual photos on this page. Photos are completely optional, and if you don't choose to load photos for your students, IEPPal will simply swap in an avatar of appropriate color for boys and girls, as you can see for some of my students that I haven't loaded actual photos for. From here, I can select the students that I will be working with simply by touching their picture, and you'll notice a little check mark shows up for each of them. And I'll set up 5 students for this session. Also across the top menu, there is a date and time selection capability. By default, when I launch a session, IEPPal assumes it is in the present time, and thus shows the current date and time. However, if desired, I can date it to any date and time setting that I wish. I would do this if I was recording a session after the fact. To set the date and time, simply touch the Pick Time button and dial the spinners to their right, date and time of day, to start your session, and hit the Done button. Finally, the last setting is the location. Within IEPPal, you can load as many different locations that a session could take place as you want. For this session, you just need to tell the system where you are by touching the Pick a Location button, and I'll set this session up for the speech room. Now we're ready to begin scoring. At this point, we will touch the Start Session button at the bottom of the screen. Presented to us, it has a row of selected students at the top. This row is scrollable left and right if you have chosen more than 4 students, which we have done in this session. To begin, we will select the student that has our focus first and touch that child's photo. A check mark will show up on their image to denote that they are the student of focus, and their preloaded goals will show up. You will be able to see up to 3 goals, but like everything else in IEPPal, if there are more, you can always swipe left or right or up and down accordingly to see the rest of the entries. You will touch the goal that you want to work on first, and the associated objectives will show immediately below. Touching a specific objective will reveal the techniques associated with the objective. As a special note, if your state IEPs do not utilize an objective tier, you may turn them off in the user profiles and go directly from goals to techniques. We are now ready to collect scores for this child, but before we do, let's take a moment to review the screen and point out a few things. First, when we started the session, a session timer began running in the upper right-hand corner. This is the total time of the current session. You will also notice that there is a timer running below the photo of the child that has focus. This is the amount of time within this session that focus has been set on this particular child. If I select another child, you'll notice that the first child's timer has stopped and the second child's timer has started. And when I return back to the first child, as expected, the second child's timer stops and the first child's timer begins ticking again. The screen is broken up into sections, and the lower portion is devoted to the scoreable techniques. Again, if there are more than can be seen, just scroll up and down. We have a feature in IEPPal that allows you to track prompts or cues used to obtain each trial result. They are optional, and if you use them, you can define what you wish for your cues to be. For my user profile, I have set up 5 prompts: verbal, visual, tactile, proximity, and physical assist. These are shown by the 5 colored buttons on the right-hand portion of the technique lines, ranging from green, which is the most desired, to red, which is the least desired. Prompting, if used, can be further enabled or disabled both at the specific technique level, as is the case for the S-Sounds technique on this child's IEP, the bottom line. Notice that there are no prompt buttons, as well as turned off for an entire child if they aren't necessary. I'll go back to the second child here, and you'll notice there are no prompts at all. Returning back to the first child. To begin scoring, all that I need to do is register a right or wrong response with the green plus or minus buttons, a green plus button or red minus button. Since this particular technique utilizes prompts, I must also indicate which prompt was used. I'll use a visual, and I'll issue it 2 times. Notice that a bubble in the far left has shown up that is a green plus with a light green square with a 2 in it. This tells me that the first trial was correct with a visual cue given twice. Watch as I score a few more trials. The bubbles will continue showing up as you score. IEPPal will accept up to 250 trials for a single technique for a single session. Once there are more than 10 results, the bubbles can be scrolled left and right to view all the previous scores. Also, to the far right, you'll notice that you will see a running total for the techniques for this session. In this case, we have 7 results. The child is scoring at a 57% correct rate with an average prompt score of 3.7. Now is a good time to mention a couple of important points. One is that if you use prompts and they apply for the line that you're working on, you must click a prompt button and the number of times you issued it. We do get a fair amount of support calls with people indicating that they can only get 1 score in and can't get to a second. The reason is IEPPal is still waiting for the prompt designations before allowing you to move on. To that end, we've also added a new feature in 2.0 that will allow you to tell IEPPal that despite prompting being applicable, you simply didn't utilize a prompt for a specific trial. You can do this by registering your plus or minus, and then instead of selecting a prompt, hit the gray X button at the end of the prompt buttons, and you will be allowed to move on to the next trial. The next new feature we put into IEPPal 2.0 is the summary record feature. Each row of techniques starts out with a summary record button, but it is soon replaced with the bubble scores like our first row that we just scored. However, if you simply want to enter final scores and bypass individual trials, you can do so by clicking the summary record button rather than starting with the plus or minus buttons. When you do, you will simply enter the total correct results, the total sample size, and an estimated prompt score, and hit save. You would use this option, for example, if the child was using your iPad to perform a task and you couldn't collect your trial-by-trial data and could only enter the final results. The next thing I'd like to point out is that when you move back and forth between students and collect scores, IEPPal will always hang on to your spot and return you to the exact spot you left off on when you return to a student, as seen here. The next new feature 2.0 is the note-taking ability. Next to the photo of the student that has focus are two icons. One is for text notes and one is for audio notes. Let's start with the text notes. When I touch the tablet icon, two things happen. I get a tablet area to type my note, and I also get a palette of my pre-configured partial notes. To attach a partial note, all I do is touch the entry and it will be added to the current note, and I can continue typing to add more to it if I desire. When I'm done, I simply click on the close button and I can continue editing and adding to this session's note for a child at any point throughout the session by opening up the note again. For audio notes, I tap on the microphone button to bring up the recording feature. To begin the recording process, I tap the microphone on the window that shows up and collect my recording. This is a sample note. When done, I tap the stop button in the recording, next to give the recording a short name, and I save it. Finally, we have the ability to track and record pragmatic observations. This is done in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. These values apply to the child that has focus at the time they are registered. For my user profile, I previously loaded behavior, eye contact, posture, and attention. You may load whatever you desire. To register an observation, simply touch the plus button. You may record frequency of the observation by touching the plus button more than once, and the counter will increment accordingly. When you've completed working with the students in a session, you can hit the Close Session button at the bottom of the screen. You can set up a new session from here or return to the main menu. As previously mentioned, you will need to sync at some point in time in the future to push this session and any others recorded up to the central reporting database. And from there you can run your summary reports. Please view our other videos on how to use the computer portion of IEPPal to set up your data and run your reports. Thank you for your time to watch this video, and we look forward to continuing to help you manage your IEP data, but most of all, recover your very valuable time. Thank you.